welcome, and thank you for joining Why Point of Purchase Needs a New Communication Strategy with Renee Harwood-Souza of RingCentral. As a reminder, if you have any questions during the conversation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now, here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have learned so much over the past 12 months. I think exactly almost 12 months ago was my last kind of conference, in-person visit, was the AFA Executive Summit, where we spoke actually about a lot of what we're going to talk about today. You know, as we've learned, right, organizations really, need to focus on their point of purchase, kind of data and strategies. And we're hearing more and more around customer loyalty and kind of what that means to, the customer, and how can retailers really thrive in this kind of rapidly changing market, if you will. I'm thrilled to be here today with Renee to discuss, kind of how to think about prioritizing and successfully meeting those demands, and diving deeper into the impact of the pandemic on the point of purchase, and why now more than ever, it's really crucial for organizations to have a comprehensive communication plan to meet those demands, certainly both internally and externally. So we have a lot of ground to cover, and I know Renee is just the person to do it for us. So number one, we'll talk about, the new deficiencies, and, kind of what are the challenges with the old point of purchase models. Number two, the importance of improved communications and how that influences customer loyalty and repeat purchase. Number three, how technology is really bridging the communication gap at all these different steps, and maybe some of the steps that we're not even aware of. Number four, how to execute, kind of flawless BOPIS and curbside transactions, which are communications many of us have had recently. And then lastly, real world examples and actionable strategies that your company can implement. So Renee, thank you. We're excited to be here.
I know, I'm so excited as well, Deborah. This is a really fun discussion, and I think it's going to be chock full of insights. I can't wait to hear people's questions as well.
Yeah, so please use the Q&A function, and I know we're going to be launching some polls. So Renee, let's take a step back. And if you think about, right, the last 12 months, the reduction in in-store shopping, right? We might have kind of in-store pickup, but truly in-store shopping. What has that meant in terms of consumer expectations from a retailer, from a brand, and how have those relationships changed?
And it's funny because I'll say it right up front. Where I'm coming from is, I'm coming from, the buy seat. I've actually been in the implementation for the stores from a technology perspective and from an operations perspective. But at the end of the day, as we're answering these questions today, we're also consumers, right? We're all buyers. So we can't even get out of the realm of talking about ourselves. I always call them the Michael and the Michelles. We're the same people that we're talking about who we're selling into. But over the past months, and I know that this is going to be a much more forward-looking conversation, but over the past, I think that the consumer, to your point, did have higher expectations, but I'd like to think it was almost higher hopes, right? As you walked into a store, you hoped toilet paper was on the shelf. You had these hopes that you really, especially if you stood outside for 30 minutes at Trader Joe's, you hoped that when you got in there, you got your product. It was just a really different expectation. And then it changed to become, I want to drive by and pick it up. I want to do BOPIS at the highest level, and I don't want to do it with other people around me. So we really had a ton of shape shifting to do. And as retail always does, it was not a problem. We figured our ways out. We found our water level, we moved around. But the expectation was indeed, curbside's going to be the norm. And I will say, one thing I heard this past week that I thought was really relevant, and that is that once we digitalize something, we don't take it away. So it's there. And so we're going to have to contend with how to make it better, but it's there.
No, that's really key. And I think that, right, there were times, truth be told, right, I was like, just want to talk to somebody, I just want to meet somebody. So it's like, I would call one of the credit card companies, whoever does that, just to have, right, like a conversation with somebody new. Because the way that, right, we've been interacting with people has continued to change, and especially those who provide services to us. As a result, how do you think the role of the kind of customer service associate, the in-store associate, how has that changed? And how have those relationships changed with not only existing customers, but potential customers?
Boy, oh boy. Well, we did a study last year, and a lot of those stats are so ridiculously, point on. And, I think the one that throws me for the biggest leap, and I've seen this with your Coresight research as well, Deborah, and that is that the customer still wants to talk. As much as we think we're buying online and everything, at the end of the day, we still want to talk. And if we don't get to talk, our statistics show that if we don't get to talk, 50% of the people don't purchase. And that's a very large number. And 35% will switch to a different retailer. So if they can't get their questions answered. So those are some pretty significant points. So what does the store associate do? The store associate needs to have like this epic knowledge. Now, the good news is the store associate, in my opinion, is usually the best versed on the product. They know what's going on. They actually know what's on the shelf. We can all talk about the experience walking into the big box store and the person says, oh yeah, that was last week. This is this week. This is what to expect. So it's very tribal knowledge. It's very current knowledge. It's not supply chain logistics. Supply chain logistics is always going to be the biggest gorilla in the room, and we're always going to have to contend with it. That's never going to go away. But at the end of the day, it's that store associate and it's that personal engagement and how much we empower or don't empower that store associate. And I think there's this I think the analogies are probably the best for me. And I think about this one store associate in our Stanford store in Gymboree who knew that a particular customer ordered the entire line of Janie and Jack as soon as it came out. And nobody ever told that store associate to make sure that person was on a hot dial. But boy, right before that happened, that person reached out and talked to that person. And by the way, they were outside the country. And so they shipped the entire new line to them every season. And that is something that can be done today, right? It's communications, it's talking, it's workflow. It's not looking at your supply chain. It's not looking at your promotions and your markdowns, right?
No, I think that is really, and it's almost intuitive, right? That is, kind of a gut aspect of, this relationship. One of the things you and I have talked about, Renee, which I find really interesting, either when you're talking on the phone to an associate, whether you're in store, and they really get you, right? I think you had mentioned some challenges right around, your phone service and right, if you, number one, develop a relationship with that associate and you can call them directly, or you can like hot button them and be like, I not only does it start to change your relationship with the retailer, the brand, the service provider, but right, think about it, if you go to a restaurant, right, there's one, kind of server who knows exactly how you like your burger, right? If you could like make sure you're eating there when they're there, these types of things. So how do you take into this like customization and personalization of an idea that we haven't talked about just in retail that much before?
Right. And I think it's always going to boil down to that store associate being the person that either has the skill or doesn't have the skill. They clearly have the greatest knowledge. How they actually do that engagement is a whole different kettle, right? And I think you and I were talking last month, you were presenting with Tractor Supply. And I asked him, I said, what do you think about video? The fact that I'm sure I'm not going to be buying my chicken feed, through video, right? But his response was really telling. And I think this is what we're going to be seeing for the future. And that is that the store associate needs to have shadow training in a different way now. They need to find pockets of goodness in their organization. And that's where video comes in, right? They can actually see how other store associates are doing things. They can actually collaborate via video. I know one of our stores was I always kind of put out the desired path and I let them find their way, and then I would cement it in behind them because I wanted to see what they were going to do with technology. And all the store associates wanted the same thing. They just wanted one app. And ironically, stats are supplying that, right? They're saying 70% of store associates and actually 70% of consumers want one app. That's just the golden rule. But what we did is we put them all on one iPad and we took them out of the back of the store and we said, walk around, don't go sit in back and look for inventory, walk around, have everything on one place. And then you can start working together. And without telling them, they started video chatting with each other. And they were literally saying, do you have this? Is this what your end cap looks like? Is this what, does this look right to you? That made the store associate such a higher value to any consumer coming in, but also to each other. And that's what we found, is that the more they know about their organization, the better they are to service you. And that's the same thing with your waiter at that restaurant, right? He's not just knowing about your burger, he's knowing everything. Like, today's not the day to have burger, right? He knows everything that's going on
today.
Right? Exactly. The fish looks better today.
Exactly. Well, and it's really interesting if you think about, right, like a high DIY environment, kind of like a Home Depot or Lowe's, where, right, there's usually, right, that, those folks in the organization, right, I still remember, I don't even know, I had this great idea to, like, I was going to lay my own, like, tile in my foyer, and, of course it didn't go exactly according to plan. And so, like, you run over to, in the city, we've got, like, Home Depot, and they were able to, walk me through kind of like, what I needed to do to fix it. And, they said, there's actually somebody in our organization, right? And this is like, and so they could, right, get that person on, whether video or whatnot, right? And we could have, like, just being there together. It does, right, change your relationship, right? And those organizations, those retailers, right, we've seen them continue to gain share, I think, during this environment, because we as consumers have trust in them. How do they, from an organizational perspective, how do they almost, like, systematize that? Because maybe they don't know, right, exactly who the person is who's the expert tile cutter, but how do they find that, and how do they serve the customer in a new way?
Right. Well, I think it all boils down to communications. And it's one of the reasons that I came into this organization, is I didn't think that the retailers were getting the full story about how communications work in the store. And frankly, in the call center and in e-com, I just didn't think that they were seeing it. What they were seeing was big, heavy infrastructure. If you compare what it was like to hold a phone, that was off the wall versus your cell phone, it's that substantial of a difference. And there's no reason store associates can't have that light of an experience. And yes, these are fragile, quote unquote, fragile devices, but they're coming more ubiquitous. So as an example, Waitrose, which is a huge grocer and retailer out of UK, had 2 devices. And I think almost every store associate you walk into, especially Home Depot and some of my favorite, Home Depot is my absolute favorite when it comes to doing it right. But you walk into Waitrose, and they had a store associate with a cell phone, a store associate with a Zebra device. So they're walking around looking like they're loaded for bear with all of these devices, right? And they didn't hesitate, like most store associates won't, to pull out their personal device and start shopping for you. And that's really challenging from HR, from, a C-level. It's a very scary thing to see that happening in your stores. So what we did is we put them together, and it was an absolute no-brainer. If you have an internet, all of your telephony can be on one thing, right? Your messaging can be on one thing. And so we have a messaging app that's called Glip, but it doesn't matter what your messaging app is. We just use them. We use whatever's there. So we use message, video, and phone all on the internet. So you walk into a Waitrose store, and that store associate is now able to look at their Zebra device, do a price lookup, a markdown, a check, and then they're also have chat on there. And they don't have to sit there and do the thumbing in front of you. They hit a record and they say, does anybody know when peaches are going to be fresh again? And send it to a cadre of people, right? And the responses come back. It is a more natural conversation, instead of, hang on, let me go check, hang on, let me type this in, let me swipe, watching somebody go through, it's painful. So in that instance, putting them all together, having them on one device, and then, being able to call each other on that device as well, and make a phone call to each other and have the line conversation. When you say, peaches, you want 6 crates of peaches? No. I just wanted to know when peaches are coming in. So clarification, communication, and whatever it is that helps that.
Well, it's funny. We have a question from the audience. Thank you. And so Tom has asked, what are some of the things that retailers can do today to improve BOPIS or curbside pickup? I mean, I'll tell you, one of the greatest pain points that I've seen, Renee, is that you go to a retailer and they're like, what do you mean? Right? Like, what do you mean you ordered something? And they're like, I don't know, maybe you go to kind of the customer service desk, right? Maybe you go to the returns desk, right? They internally aren't even sure necessarily always where to go. So how do we fix that? And how do we make it seamless for the customer?
That's my bailiwick, that's my passion. And it was my passion before the pandemic, which I think is interesting. Nobody listened to me, but Curbside is here to stay. Don't let anybody change your mind on that one. But the reality is this, I put together, because I had to have a talking slide, I put together an 8-step how to do Curbside successfully and used communication tools. But that slide was more about, and the discovery is more about where your communication is broken, or where it might not just be synced up properly. And how it flows is as follows. Because you can't train your customers, right? I mean, I think I'm singing to the choir here, but you can't train your customers. So every time you go to a curbside pickup, it's going to be different. There's some gold standards in some places, but trust me, the geography changes and the gold standard drops. So you're just not going to have the same experience everywhere. So what we did is we put this discovery slide together to actually walk people through for an hour and just say, the product is ordered, the product's confirmed in the store associate has to do a pick, pack, and ship in the store. They set it aside and we walk through it. But then what we do is we weave in the communication and we say, okay, they got the notification, who's in the curbside queue today, right? When the store associate comes in the morning, they pick up their handheld device and they log into it, or they know that this is a curbside queue. So when the person pulls up and they text you, or they glip you, glip is our messaging app, or they do a telephone call, that goes to a cadre of people in a queue, whoever's on queue side, who's ever on queue for curbside. They pick it up and they say, Michelle's got it. And everybody knows in the store, so everybody doesn't come run forward. One of my favorite examples of that was, like I say, I love my Home Depot. And every place I go, I test out Home Depot because I love to see what they do. And in my Home Depot, I pulled up to pick up a vanity, and I think it was a mirror this time. And it was a big mirror, albeit, but I had 10 people descend on my car, right? Now, that is the ultimate customer experience, right? It's like I felt like queen for a day. But all I could do is in my operational reptilian brain go, oh my gosh, how much is this costing them? It was crazy. And then I saw it was all dispatch radios, which, dispatch radios have a point. I mean, I come from Nextel, if you remember what that was. So dispatch radios are super important, but it's not a full communication realm, right? So we just help to figure out how you integrate the communications, how you integrate queues, how you can integrate it more seamlessly. Because guess what 2021 is going to bring? Returns and exchanges at curbside.
So how does that work?
Well, that is where communications is really going to come in. So now, today, when Chili's is one of our customers, and when Chili's, and they've been probably one of the best. I think they were doing curbside long before curbside was ubiquitous, right?
As a consumer, yes.
Right. And so we all pretend like we don't know that, but we do know that. But when they go to the car and someone says, this is the wrong order, or I want cheesecake, the person standing there gets on the phone and says, we need a cheesecake, stat, we want to change this. So they're not going, okay, I'll be right back. And you see that person go away and be gone forever.
Well, they're also, right, the interesting thing, and once again, I've personally experienced it several times, at least, not the forgotten cheesecake, but maybe like you need more plates or napkins, and the fact that customer service associate, server, whatever you want, they're standing there with you, right? And then they're kind of dialing, there's something that changes your relationship with the brand. And I do think that is really critical, Renee.
Well, and I think also with the health, the health measures that are being put into place, these poor associates, they were bad enough, trying to not have visibility into the supply and when the supply was coming in for toilet paper and everything else, but then to be, relegated to being 6 feet away and screaming at people through masks and doing all these other things. They need as much help as they can get from a communication standpoint. They need to be able to call, to collaborate, to text, to type, all those things on one device, and honestly get to the call center, get to the customer care center. Now with the multimodal social media purchasing, that's just skyrocketed.
Well, you talked about GLIP, and I know that RingCentral has grown through acquisition. Can you talk about some of those acquisitions, because I'm personally fascinated, and how those have changed the organization, and what, what does that do in terms of like the holistic approach to, kind of retailers and brands?
Well, so when I implemented 4 years ago now, what I did is I put everything, because it took me about 6 months to see the vision. It's hard to say that putting in a cloud platform is going to drive revenue, but I've actually figured out a way to do that. And that was to say how much value, and we all know how much a store makes a day. We watched our traffic conversion numbers, like, it was the stock ticker. It's just like going downhill on a sled some days. And so what we did was we actually said, okay, what is a different way to look at this? And we put all the apps on one iPad, and we had people walking around and said, okay, I can see what I'm doing right. I can see the store apps, but now it's gotten to the point where, since it was all on the internet, they're all coming together. So in one application, and it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't matter if it's Teams, if it's Zoom, if it's Slack, they can all come together on the internet. And then we are the platform that underpins it all. So what we did is we listened to the customers, Chili's, Honest Company, Restoration Hardware, Gymboree, and they said, we don't want to have 3 apps. We need to have them all speak together. So they unified in a number of different ways. We have, a RingCentral office, if you will, that allows people to, and we call it GLIP, it's message each other, but allows people to actually, because this is on the internet, because it started at telephone, right? And that's the thing that was hard for me to get through. You can slowly turn this up and you can slowly turn it down because it's on the cloud. So you don't even have to rip out your infrastructure. But let's say everybody's on it, you're starting to message the landlord, the electrician, the warehouse, the RMA organization. They're all in the same place. So you don't have to have a phone with 25 buttons. It's now a conversation with everybody. So, but I turn it up very slowly. So I turned it up for my stores with phones. I turned it up for my stores with messaging. I turned it up for my stores with social media. And at some point, the stores are going to become mini call centers based on our opening and closing. And so we should look at them, in my opinion, at least I did, and it really was a good imperative for me. But in my opinion, and in my situation, I looked at the stores as call centers and said, you each get a phone, you each get a queue. What queues are you in today? Are you just in RMAs today? Are you just in line set today? What are you in today? And they understood that. They understood that language.
So
that was just combining it. That wasn't even going to the social media side of it. Is off the
whole different kind of realm. So I guess I have many questions, but number one, how does that change, right, the kind of relationships amongst employees, and then ultimately, how are they serving the customer better? Because this idea of, right, this instant communication, and like, I have a question, I can get it answered. In some ways, no matter how complex, which ultimately is a lot of stress that we all have on a day-to-day basis, it's truly seamless, and you start to build this idea of, right, this like super app, right?
Well, again, it's so boring. I mean, RingCentral is the most successful company you don't know. I constantly say that. I work for
one of those. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. And I bought from them 4 years ago, and it was a hard pitch because it's like, telephones are so great, but the reality is, what it did for me was it said, I consolidate a ton of vendors. I consolidate a ton of contracts. I consolidate a ton of service level agreements. I mean, everybody's got great products, right? They've got, I had so many task management and workforce management, and all of these things should work together, or at least be able to be seen together. But I didn't want to go through configuring every single item together, especially in a store environment where you've got PCI and DSS and SOX and all these other compliances. I did not want to do that. So I needed to find something that allowed me the most broad platform, and then put stuff on top. And then I could have one back to pat, not throat to choke, back to pat, But I really needed one partner. I really needed one. I had to consolidate because it was out of control. And trying to even get the cost of a store, or the, worse yet, trying to determine the store's revenue, you know, in totality, was near impossible given the disparate number of communication sources we had going and the disparate number of tools we had going in. So consolidation of those tools is the most important thing, in my opinion. And so once that's done, everything else is easy. Everything else is turn on, turn off. Like I say, it's just like, you know, getting, again, I go back to, it seems like, it doesn't seem like it's analogous to, but it really is, you know, to your cell phone. Remember when downloading an app was the most insane thing you could do, you know, and now it's like, delete it, reinstall it next week when I got more room, right? When I start traveling again, hotels.com will come back on, you know?
Exactly.
And that's exactly the way we should be doing our enterprise business. We shouldn't be downloading free stuff just because we can. You know, we should have that holistic platform and then put everything on top of it.
So we have poll questions to review. We've got Q&A. So let's just kind of dive right in. So I thought this was interesting in terms of asking the audience about how communication has changed, and, you know, so has your external communication technology strategy changed in the last 12 months? 80% said somewhat. I mean, I think that that's impacting all of us. And then this was even more interesting. Do you feel the role of the store associate has changed over the last 12 months? Basically, 80% said at some level. And then as we look at some of the audience questions, I'll start the last one and kind of move forward. So thank you. But Suzanne asked, right, do store associates prefer to use their own devices or company issued devices for company communication? I think you've touched on that, but, you know, can you be more specific, Renee?
Oh, absolutely. That's the bane of every IT's existence in store operations, especially in California, where we're so highly regulated and watched. You know, if you allow a store associate to use their personal phone for a minute, they get paid for 8 hours. So it's a real challenge. What I loved about this solution was, again, the slow turn on. And I think this, you know, there are other solutions comparable to this, but in my opinion, it's more about bringing that together, that multifunction device. Having said that, I actually used iPads in my first store because I was so cheap, and I used iPods on Wi-Fi's, right? So I wasn't going to get a carrier service. I wasn't going to do any of that stuff. I just wanted to use what I had inside the store. And so the net is you try and find the most base existence, and then you build off of it. You better believe that every time you walk into a store, they pull out their own personal cell phone and start using it. I think that will be more the case until we start getting the Zebras and the Motorola and the handheld devices integrated. I think once we get used to doing that, it'll be better. I have a family member who's a meter reader, and the poor guy, he's got all the things on his hip now, and they're all iOS, which, you know, would make it look flashy, but, you know, from his meter to his phone to, I mean, everything is on his hip, and it's like, again, here we go, we're separating out instead of bringing it together, right?
He needs a bigger waist to hold everything, right?
He needs a bigger waist.
I mean, that's like the truth of it.
Right.
So another question from the audience, which is, how should retailers think about the role of the store associate as we transition to a post-pandemic environment? I mean, honestly, we've been asked that, you know, is everyone feels like the light is on the horizon, but I guess not only what is their role, but as you and I have talked, right, my personal passion right now, we're doing a lot of research at Coresight around live streaming. How do we think about like the role of the stores? And if somebody is coming to the store to maybe watch a live stream and then purchase, there's like a whole nother level of complexity that we're putting on the retailers and ultimately the technology. So how do we think about this?
I've got so many thoughts around this, and I really still believe that, and I might not be even putting it entirely correctly, but I think that the store associate is going to become a contact center. The store is going to be a contact center. We've already seen, you've seen it in your own research, Deborah, where the store has become the distribution hub, right? You know, there are many distribution hubs. And so, and that's a challenge. The store is going to continue to morph. I mean, look at High Street in the UK. I mean, boy, has that ever changed. And so the store associate needs to become more of a hub. And so they need to be a knowledge worker more than they ever have been before. And then I think what happens is the call center becomes a social media agency, right? So the call center is sitting there looking at WhatsApp and Marketplace and Face, you know, looking at all of the social media apps. And then they can manage those relationships, but they should be able to speak to the stores. They should be able to speak to the store associates. Today they do, but it's very disjointed, right? And so the store, to save the sale, to help, you know, help the consumer, the store associate is speaking with the contact center. Heck, the store associate is speaking with the distribution center, and they're all talking together, right? So I think that the store associate's going to be more of a contact center, and so in which case you have to build those skill sets. They're going to have to do more phone talking than they've done before, right? They're going to have to learn how to analyze what the need really is. They're going to have to be much more predictive than they have been in the past. So it's that, but I think all of that comes together when you get to Curbside, right? All of that comes together when you get to BOPIS, and that is because those people do have the face-to-face presence. They just need to be armed with the information that is relevant to the consumer.
Does that change? I mean, it's interesting, you know, having spent a lot of time in Europe, and right, you know, if you look at wait staff at restaurants or sales associates at retail, I mean, these are careers. And I feel, right, with 100% turnover in retail, we definitely haven't looked at this as a career. As you envision it, which I think is really insightful, do you think that we create more career associates? And, you know, do they have almost more, in some ways, right, you know, in terms of the job that they're doing, right? If it's tech-based and then service-based, that's a whole different level in terms of what we've asked them to do in the past.
Whole different level. And it's very difficult to go in and even with the younger associates who are so used to that being their reality, they're still not consumer facing necessarily in every environment. And they still don't have the eye contact. I mean, it's a high turnover. So the best thing that you can hope for is to get somebody that is consistently trained, right? Getting that training and consistency. And again, I go back to video for that. I just really think we're not going to get kids to read run books in stores, right? We're not going to get the run book in that old, I just picture those back office with that shelf that's full of dusty, you know, run books. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to have to be on video. It's going to have to be streamed. It's going to have to be YouTubed, so that when they have time on the floor that they can stop and watch those snippets. The attention span's gone. So we really have to make consumable training, and we have to make it for all levels. And then you get into the luxury brands. Yeah. We've got quite a few luxury. I mean, we've got luxury brand customers. We've got value brand customers. We've got across the platform. We got CPG, a lot of restaurants, a lot of high-end restaurants. And the reality is that the training is best done with shoulder to shoulder. And you know, if that's video, we do it via video. And the same thing with the consumer. I think if the consumer really wants to buy a $35,000 watch, there might be a video conference going on for that. There is today. I know that for sure. Just between you and me, I know that for sure. But I think that people are getting better at buying online, and so we have to get better at communicating online.
All right, we've got a lot from the audience, but I want to speak in one of my own exactly this. So what are you seeing in terms of differences between not only luxury customers and how they want to engage with the store, but then how they want to engage, you know, kind of internally? And can you compare and contrast that to more of the value retailers or restaurants, brands?
Absolutely. It's very interesting. You were talking recently at another webinar about how everybody was so surprised that really what all the customers wanted last year after it was said and done was fast shipping and cheaper prices. And it was like, you know, are we really surprised by this? Isn't that exactly what we want? Actually, I think in my life, I can speak for myself, I want it faster, cheaper, better, right? You know, that's my order. But
always raise the bar, Renee.
Right? You know, right? But so the way this is really fleshed out has been fascinating. The luxury brands have found their own level, and their own level is actually video, personalized video shopping. And that even goes for fittings. It goes, like I said, it goes for extremely expensive watches and for cars. It has been so obvious that we're setting up a very high stylized, high personalized shopping situation. And those are, you know, pretty high end on both sides. Ironically, the value brand has been off the hook with sales over the past year. So their relevance has nothing to do with the same kind of video conferencing, et cetera. They just want to get the supply chain end to end as fast as they possibly can because they can move product really, really fast right now. So whatever helps them do that, and in this case, it's going to be telephony, it's going to be the multifunction device, it's going to be getting it out the door. So it's a wholly different experience than the luxury brand. The luxury brand, and unfortunately, the luxury brand continues to make, in my opinion, the mistake that what's good for the headquarters is good for the brand. Yeah. And so they keep putting in these heavy systems, like I'm going to buy the most expensive system, when in fact, I think, like I said before, I always tried to find the lowest point of entry. And you know, it's funny, I'll say this, and it's kind of a bomb that I leave out there, but I saved over $2.5 million in my first 6 months after I deployed. Wow. Because of my consolidation of partners, my consolidation of lines, I couldn't even tell people inside the organization because I was so frightened by what I'd done. It was like, what did I screw up? There's no way I could save this money. Right? I mean, it literally gave me a stomach.
Thought of this before.
Right? It's like, that's the first question I would ask myself is, what did you do before so wrong? But I think that's part of the problem is that we don't look for the simple. You know, we don't look for the easy, we look for the complex. And I think the luxury brands still have a little bit of that, but they're going to, you know, their price points are so amazing and their margins are so great. I love working with the luxury brands. You know, especially like we have Canada Goose up in Canada, and they have like vaults where you walk into and sub-zero, and it's like, no, that's a challenge for a zebra. You know, can we get a zebra to work in a sub-zero environment? That's going to be interesting.
You know, what's interesting that you know, is a lot of consumers, you know, as they've shopped that specific brand in New York specifically, right, their feedback has been, it's fascinating. You mentioned that, just how great the customer service is. And like the idea that a sales associate will come out, right, you know, there's lines around the building, ask them for their size, the color and whatnot. And they're like, we don't have it in the store. So you don't have to wait in line. We can actually buy it for you right now, right here. And, you know, you can go home. It'll be there, you know, by the time you get home, right? We'll ship it from one of our other stores. And that to me, I mean, from a customer service perspective is, I mean, I don't know why it's like so mind blowing, but that should be what we expect, right? As consumers, we should expect that. And I mean, well, think about it, right? When you shop on e-commerce and it shows out of stock, I'm like, then don't show it to me. Why are you showing me? Now I have like total FOMO, right? Even if it's just like steel cut out, which I tried to buy yesterday, and I'm like, so I feel like there's this way, and I think it's, you know, RingCentral is really kind of leading that in terms of, right, if you put the customer, and I think it's actually, when you put the customer in the middle, right, and you think about everything around them, as you put the retailer or the brand in the middle, it's a completely different way to offer service and services.
Well, and I think too, the point of sale often becomes the thing that's like the block between the customer and the buyer. I mean, it's just like, or the customer and the seller. It's just like, it's right there in front of you. We used to have that problem at my brands all the time. It was like, move that point of sale away, make it smaller, get out of there. That's where endless aisle came from, right? That's where, you know, all of the things that we were doing right before we went into this. And I think you're right, because 9 times out of 10, Deborah, I only have 2 questions. I just have 2 questions, right? I don't want to stand on a 30-minute line because I have 2 questions. So that line busting has a whole new opportunity. So let's use that line busters. Let's use that endless aisle. Let's get people out of the stores. And the only way we can do that is by communicating.
So Renee, we have a lot of questions we didn't get to, but that'll be on our next conversation. And especially as everyone's looking forward to holiday, right? Because, you know, right now they're trying to think about how the consumer is going to behave in-store, online, the services that they need. So there's a lot of questions around that, but we're going to let Pepe close us out, take us to the finish line. If a sales associate becomes, a knowledge worker, and I like that idea, and spends more time on the phone with customers, this is so great. How does that impact the customer experience for those that are at the store that require service, especially if, this knowledge worker is, specifically the one person that they would ask, or if they have questions about a product. So Pepe, great question, and thank you. But Renee, that's on you.
Right. No, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant question, and I completely understand it. And again, I go back to, this is about workflow and about how your communication is actually structured. Not every store has 10 associates, right? So you have to, first of all, if you have 10 associates, they all have a device that they're logged into. Somebody else can take that, right? You even can say, someone's standing at the cash wrap, please bring somebody else up here to deal with this. And they can do it, surreptitiously enough to continue to having that conversation, especially the young kids today. So they can say that, they can busy themselves out while they're standing there talking to somebody. I am not available. And then it goes to other people, so people know that they have to be on the watch. So that was really super helpful at Office Depot. So Office Depot is using this very, robustly in terms of, because those are big store footprints, right? So they really needed to have, and they don't have a ton of people working there at the same time. You'll see it when you go to the front checkout. It's only 1 or 2 people, and that's the communication. So what they did is they have everybody on point of presence, and they look down and say, oh, everybody's busy but me, I better get to the front, right? So they have, and it's at the end of the day, that technology is supposed to be underpinning and supporting what your workflow is, not the reverse.
To conclude, because I know we're out of time, it's very interesting what you said specifically around Office Depot, right? As I was, everyone's working at home, right? Like everything is completely overloaded. And I remember going there and getting not only very quick service, but they helped me make a decision, right? Because I was looking at 3 different, let's just say 3 different items I wanted to purchase. And they were like, based on what you're telling me, this is exactly, and you walked away with confidence. And I never looked back. And from a consumer perspective, right? This is why I love covering retail, right? Ultimately, right, you're the consumer and you understand. And you're like, when you have that experience and you're like, you go back to Office Depot again because it was so great. And right, you made a higher ticket purchase and you felt, right, kind of pat yourself on the back. You felt good about it. And
I'm an emotional buyer, we all are.
I think it's this idea kind of at that time, right? If you've taken the time to go in store, you're obviously looking for something. And if you're, doing kind of curbside, BOPIS, pickup, right? You're looking for something else, and for the retailer to have that opportunity. And this is, I think, the big question around holiday. So we'll leave that as the cliffhanger, Renee. And we'll hope that. Thank you everyone for joining us. We've covered a lot of ground, right? Specifically around the knowledge worker, the future of the associate, the future of the store. And, what does it all mean, especially as we're starting to make a lot of these plans and expenses, right? These investments for holiday 21. Thank you. Thanks, Renee, and thanks, RingCentral. We'll see you guys all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.